Hi, I'm Reggie Harris, and I'm running for Cincinnati City Council in 2021.
Hi, Mika. How are
Hey,
you?
good. How are you, Reggie?
I'm doing really well, and I am
Wonderful.
super excited uh, for our conversation today. I think I was telling you earlier that I've been wanting to do a podcast for forever, and so now
Yes,
we're here.
here we are. This is amazing. And I've always wanted to be a guest on a podcast. So we are just filling each other's bucket right now.
I love it. I love it. So, the occasion of this podcast is really, we're both running for Cincinnati City Council, and I thought that it would be interesting to capture the what happens inside of a campaign real time. What are the conversations that candidates have with other candidates, with their team? And when we, particularly in our city, in our time, when we think about transparency and when we think about getting to know elected officials, really using this opportunity and using technology and social media to create a stronger connection between potential elected officials, candidates and voters and constituents. So this is really the reason why I'm like, oh, let's do a podcast. Yeah,
Makes good sense. Awesome. I love it. Yeah. In technology these days, I think now more than ever, we are leaning on it to get the information that we need. And so these are wonderful channels and opportunities. So thanks for doing
yeah. And I was telling my team, you were the first person that I thought about. I was like, well, our first host, and part of that is because we've been chatting for like I don't know a couple years
I know.
about our decision to run.
Yes. It's been a
Yeah.
journey, that's for sure. We've definitely had our wine meetup moments and coffee and all that kind of stuff. So it's great to, now actually it's a tangible thing now, right? We are in
Yeah.
not only the year before, but we are in the actual year of this election. So it's amazing. It's kind of like this time warp too, because it's kind of like we were talking about it and it was realistic then, but we're here in this moment, and so it's just like, is this really happening? It's kind of serendipitous in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Do you remember when we first met? Because I do.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I do. I really do. That
When
was awesome. Yeah.
when
So
was it?
of course we were at a shooting. It was either photos or the actual commercial. I can't remember, but it was for Greg Landsman. And so I think it was in Pleasant Ridge at a house there. And I think we actually started, you parked, I parked, and we were like walking at the same time. And then we just, hey, how are you? My name's Mika. And we just connected. And so I remember you saying, like, it is so hard to, be a new person in Cincinnati and like really get, planted in and know people. And I'm like, Reggie, you know what? I am definitely, hey, I will introduce you or what have you. And here we are. Now we're running for council. So this is
I
a
know.
I know.
You totally remember it. Yes.
Yes.
And we felt lockstep. And I
Yeah.
think that it was for Greg Land's commercial. And
Yes.
so our first meeting is recorded for posterity because we were like walking next to each other the entire
Yes.
time.
Don't
The
you wish
entire
there
time.
was a photographer taking a picture of us that day walking down the street?
But
We'd have
I have a
campaign
copy of
collateral.
that photo.
Do you? Oh my gosh.
I have it. Yeah, I have a
Oh
copy
my
of it.
goodness. Okay. We have
Yes.
to hear it.
Well, so because like I I know you, and I feel like I know why you want to run for city council because of like our conversations and our mutual friends. But like I would love for you to just sort of state from your perspective and how you arrived at this moment and why are you running?
Right. Why am I running? Well, thank you, Reggie, for one, having me as your first guest. I so appreciate the invitation. And I was thinking, like, should we have mimosas right now? But we can do that later. But I'm born and raised in Cincinnati, and so my roots are very deep here. And where I have grown up here and watching a city just become so dynamic and vibrant, I know that there are certainly some more opportunity for us to continue to grow as a community. And so, some people may have experienced, what folks might call a tale of two cities. And so for me, it's just like, that's unacceptable for one, as a person living in this community. And so, I really have come to the realization that, our neighborhoods need some attention, right? And so I'm coming from a place of really wanting to grow community. And so those things like housing, an important issue. I raised my son in Avondale, so I know the importance of trying to find housing that is suitable for families. And so that's certainly something that drives me. I also know that as a small business owner, after college, I started a couple small businesses. One was consulting, organizational development consulting. And so working with organizations around leadership capacity and retention and performance management metrics and training and all of these things. And also Mary Kay business. So, being an ambitious woman, entrepreneur, working home-based business, I've certainly learned the value of not only being a small business owner and what that does in terms of the economy and the community, but also how hard it is for small businesses.
Yeah.
So those are some things that I'm really excited about in terms of working on and investing. But, it's really the service for me. My life has always been threaded and rooted in serving my community. And so, I've served on boards of organizations that I care a whole lot about, like Make-A-Wish Foundation and Women Helping Women and Muse, Cincinnati Women's Choir, and, currently with UMADOT, which is an addiction treatment service recovery organization that helps minority populations. And so it's that level of service that really drives me. And so, I've served in as a county employee, I've served in our court system, being able to provide better access to justice and diversity that's more reflected in our court system, that is also reflected in the community. And it's that passion around service. In 2016, I was an organizer in the presidential campaign. And for me, it was that moment of really having the experience of seeing a campaign from the tangible, tactical kind of side, knocking on the doors and making the phone calls and connecting in that way, in that civic way. And so just kind of taking those experiences for me and knowing that we are at such a critical moment not only in our nation, but the issues that we see on a national level, they start right at home. And so it's that leadership and that desire to serve that I'm really bringing, and my passion to really want to see Cincinnati be the best place in the world, that someone can raise a family, and people that look like me, people that look like us, have an opportunity to thrive here, and all people having the opportunity to thrive, but particularly making sure that we are having a moment where equity is our driver, right? Like that is the North Star. And so that's why this is an important election, because we get to help shape the complexion, the diversity of city council. And so it's going to be so important to have, not only those perspectives, those diverse perspectives to move forward, but those relationships, right? And so I go back to, our history together and what I know about you and your desire to want to serve too. So, that's just a little bit about me and why I'm doing this. So I'm really excited to be in this race. Yeah.
It's really cool to hear you put the whole reasoning together in the timeline, right? So I knew those things individually, right, and saw and sort of observed some of your reasoning. So it's really cool to be like, oh yes, that's it. That's why Meeka is doing it.
And it feels good to even make the decision and knowing and then be able to connect that decision to the emotive value of that, right? Like, this is why I'm doing this. It all makes sense. And so for me, and I don't know what your process was in coming to the decision, but I certainly took time to reflect, right? Like, okay, here's the support, right? Of the encouragement. There's also that moment of reflecting on yourself. And then you start thinking yes, this is what I've contributed to this community, and this is why this is so important right now. And so I'm just excited to just have this really full circle moment, right?
Yeah.
So
God.
so tell me, why are you doing this?
You
And
know,
how? Yeah.
no, go
How
ahead, go
how
ahead.
did you arrive at this decision?
Well, and this always happens when I have a conversation with you. Like, you triggered so many thoughts in my head. I really appreciated you saying how much you spent time thinking about this and planning and considering it, because it was the same way for me. I really started this journey of thinking about running for office in 2017, like shortly before we met,
Yeah.
and wanted to make sure that I actually had the skills and understood the city, understood myself, understood my leadership style, my leadership abilities, wanted to hone those things before taking on the awesome responsibility of being an elected official. But then, so like I did that work, but I also think that to a certain degree, I've always been prepping for this, and
Mm-hmm.
I've always sort of been prepping for this moment. And I really think that I like the intentional prepping for this moment came, and we share the love of dance, and we
Yeah.
both, have dance backgrounds. But when I retired from a 10-year career as a professional ballet dancer, I started teaching at a performing arts high school in Chicago. And it was an incredible high school with like a ton of resources. It was just like very well resourced. Um, and despite the resources, despite the stellar staff, there was still a significant number of youth that were struggling. And I couldn't understand why the youth were struggling, even though we had all of these supports. And so I went to grad school, got my master's degree in social work at Boston University, and learned about trauma, and eventually became a trauma informed practitioner, a trauma therapist. And I recognized, I was like, oh, those kids were experiencing trauma. And we, even though we had a strong academic and arts institution, we weren't a trauma informed place. So that was that moment of understanding how our larger social, political, communities, society impacted folks at a very individual level. And then when I was working as a trauma therapist, right, I got into the routine of practicing that work and doing that work. And I remember one day driving to work, stopping at a red light and feeling like I was getting ready to have a panic attack, and started to like have a panic attack. So I pulled over and I'm doing my deep breathing exercises. And in that process, I realized a couple of days before, I did an intake with a mom, and a mom told me that their second grader tried to like harm themselves, tried to like jump out of a window. When I heard that, I didn't respond emotionally. I just began to proceed with logistics and gathering more information. And I recognized in the car, I was like, who am I? How did I hear that from that mom? And how did I not respond emotionally? And I think I felt numb. And a couple of days after that, I went to a social work conference, and I heard the parable of the river. And I think I might have even talked to you about this, but the villager goes down to the river, sees a baby in the river, jumps in the river, rescues the baby, takes the baby to the riverside, and then again sees another baby, jumps back in, and before you
And
know
all
it,
of a sudden,
the river is full of babies. And
yeah.
so the villager calls all of the villager friends to come help rescue these babies. The village sets up like hospitals and schools and shops at the river's edge to support the rescue effort. And of course, they can't save all of the babies, and even some of the villagers die trying to save the babies. Until one day, this villager leaves the group, starts to walk upstream, and they yell at her and they say, "Where are you going? We need your help." And she says, "No, you got it. I'm going upstream to see who is throwing these babies in the river." And that knocked me over, Meeka, because I recognized, oh, I was feeling like one of the villagers drowning in the river trying to save the baby. And so that's when I made a decision in my career to go upstream, right? In my civic life. That's when I decided to join the Board of Equality Ohio to work on LGBTQ rights in the state, getting appointed to the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority Board to, think about, one of our main staples, one of our main interventions as a city, public housing for our housing issue. And then I started to work in affordable housing. And so I see my run for city council as a continuation of that journey upstream. right? To figure out how do we stop people from falling into the river. You know, I think about growing up. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. My grandmother, because of a HUD program in the 70s, bought a house on a fixed income. And can I tell you how my grandmother having that house saved so many people from homelessness?
Uh-huh.
Like, I would
Takes
not
a
be
village.
here today. Yes, it takes a village. It takes a
Mm-hmm.
community.
Yeah.
Right. And so this journey upstream has made me recognize, oh, okay, for cities to be great, for cities to grow equitably, for us to address COVID, we have to have those downstream, you know, day to day. We have to meet people's immediate needs, right, and help people because folks are struggling. But we cannot lose sight of our prize. We cannot lose sight of the vision. Where do we want to grow into? What type of city do we want to be? How do we want to impact folks and make sure people have agency, have autonomy, right? Can fully participate in our city. So yeah, like I think it's wrapped up in that service piece as well. But yeah, that's what 4 years of thinking about running.
Right, what that looks like, and I'm glad, a couple of things too. One, when we look at politics and gender divide here, they say that, men might wake up and say, hey, I think I'm gonna run for president, and women have to think about it. And it's not just solely women, but those that process, right, through experience and through just that emotional way, so it's like I had to come to respect my own process too. And at the same time, I think wrapped up in that is this idea that this has to be, in my opinion, this has to be a calling too, right? To serve in a public capacity. And for me, and I'm sure you feel the same way, this is beyond um something to put on a resume, right? Like, so in order to be an advocate for people, because that's what we're called to do as public servants, is, for the least of those, and standing up for those that are tired, hungry, poor, sick, all of those things, this has to be something that's greater and beyond all of us. So, and sometimes we don't get to have these kind of conversations in a political way, right? In a political culture, because, people don't just really come with that lens all the time. But for me, there's a undeniable calling to do just that, going upstream and having the courage to do that, asking the deep questions and being that person that will advocate for others.
Yeah, I love what you said, Meeka, because I mean that's a perfect, you perfectly segue into the next thing that I wanted to discuss when you talked about this idea of a greater calling. And I think about our the current political climate in our city and the level of cynicism and distrust and sort of infighting that we're seeing, and how it's going to be critically important for the next council and for the next mayor to really focus on building trust, building back trust with voters and constituents, but also trust and mutual respect amongst council members and the mayor. I've been saying this, and we've talked about this, and in the state publicly. I think that anytime you talk to a candidate and they start saying what what I'm gonna do, how I'm gonna fix the budget, in my head I'm laughing. I'm like, no, you're not. Like we
Right.
alone cannot do anything. Like we can have a vision, we can have ideas, but our vision, our ideas, our desires for the city will only be fully realized if we have good relationships, good working relationships with other council members and the mayor. So I just think that's critically important.
Absolutely. I mean, that is everything, right? Relationships, no matter what sector, across sectors, across industries, across agencies, relationships is how collaboration happens, right? You need other people. And to the point that when we're talking about being public servants, it's about all of us, not one of us, right? And so the natural way to get there is because we are coming with the perspective of wanting to improve, right, the community around us, people's lives. And so it takes people to have that same perspective too, understanding what the issues are, but to have that wanting desire to do just that, right? That unrelenting, non-negotiable desire. And so, to your point, relationships are going to be so important in this next council because, as we know, there are a lot of open seats, right? And so, not only being able to, because we're talking about really important things
Yeah.
to solve and to shape. Housing, right? I know that's on a lot of people's minds. Restoring trust in government, absolutely. And when you have good relationships with people, you're effectively able to demonstrate those things. One, that you can get things done, and that you can work with people, right? And this is a team effort. So
Yeah.
I'm
And
looking for,
ultimately, I
yeah,
mean, we're elected, and we're hopefully will be elected, and elected officials are there to get things done.
right.
And very much is like, if we're lucky enough to get elected, we have 2 years.
Yeah.
So I'm like, listen, we got to
Hit
get
the
down
ground
to
running,
business,
right?
right?
Exactly. No
Get
fluff.
the ground,
So,
no fluff. We have to have a dream. We have to have a vision. We have to have this,
right,
ideal end goal. But then we start breaking up into those bits. Okay,
right, right.
how are we going to get there?
Exactly. And it's having that focus, right? And it's, to your point, hitting the ground running. And so it's going to take, so work ethic is going to be so important in this next council. It's like, what are you willing to do to get the work done, right? Are you willing to stay overnight? Are you willing to burn the midnight oil and make it happen? And so, to that end, it's that ethic, that work ethic that's going to be important, rooted in the value of being able to work with other people that have a strong work ethic.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Meeka, I know we could go
I know
all day
all
with
day.
this.
One last thing, though, that I'm just
Yeah,
going to
please.
just interject. So, talking about our process is, it's so, in retrospect and hindsight, looking back at this, I remember when we first were telling each other, like, hey, I'm thinking about running for council. I remember we were downtown at one of those cool places on Vine Street, not Vine Street, but Main Street, having a
Yeah.
glass of wine. And, I think I was like, you know what? I think I'm kind of thinking about it. You're like, you know what? I'm thinking about it too. So this is an amazing moment just to get to this place where, like, this is real and we are running. So
Yeah, we are like fully in it.
yes.
Okay, so I want to close out our session. So my husband Aaron is obsessed with this other podcast called La Culturistas, and Bowen Yang is one of the co-hosts, and I'm sorry I forget the other guy, but Bowen Yang's on SNL, and they do this like kind of like game that I want to do with us, where you have like 1 minute to like go on a rant about something that like kind of gets on your nerves. And so what we're going to do is we're going to time each other. So get out your phone.
Okay,
You're gonna have a
so
1
all right.
minute timer, right?
Oh
And
my
so
goodness.
this is how it goes.
Okay.
We're gonna pick a national political topic.
Okay.
Right? A national political topic. And you're gonna go on a 1 minute rant about something that bothers you about this national political topic.
Okay.
So you're gonna let me know when I start. I'm gonna start off by saying, you know what bothers me? And then I'm gonna go on my rant. You're gonna give me a sign. So when I get to 30 seconds, you're gonna say 30 seconds. You're gonna say 15 seconds. And then you're gonna say 5 seconds. And then I'm gonna have to be done. Right?
Okay.
And I have a 1 minute, and I have to go on for a full rant about what bothers me. And then I'll do you.
All right.
Okay? So let me know when
all right.
we're
So
ready.
we'll do just like the podcast countdown in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
You know what bothers me? What bothers me is folks' reaction to Ted Cruz going to Cancun. What bothers me about that is that people act outraged as if they thought like he somehow was like going to be a good person. Like Ted Cruz has shown us that he is totally the guy that would go to Mexico while Texas is suffering. Like how many times, what would make people think that he would not do that? And the outrage. I just want folks to save their energy. Use that energy for something more productive.
30 seconds left.
Outraged at Ted Cruz for going to Mexico. when, Texas is like, under 17,000 feet of snow. Like, it's just so on brand for Ted Cruz. Like, that's actually something that we should
10
expect.
seconds.
And I would just think, like, maybe send your wife and daughter. That's acceptable, but you're the senator. Go shovel snow. Go start some fires. Like, serve the people of Texas. So that's what bothers me.
Fun. Oh my goodness. Does this can this be a serious topic too? I mean,
It can be a
everything's
serious
of course.
topic. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. So
I'm going to do
let's
the
see.
same thing.
All
You have
right.
your topic?
I do.
Okay. So in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You know what really bothers me? What really bothers me is when people say, my vote doesn't count. Oh my goodness. As an organizer, it makes me cringe. Because for one, I say, do you know your history? Do you know how many people have fought and struggled and shown up on the front lines to make sure that people like you and I could not only vote, but also run for office? And so I get really sad when I know that people feel disenfranchised.
30 seconds.
To not show up and cast their do their civic duty and cast their voice at the ballot box. And so to that I say, you know what? Register to vote for one and show up. Find something that's important to you, and those things that you find yourself not being able to sleep about, those are the reasons that you actually show up to vote. So if you don't have if you need better wages, show up to vote on that. If you need someone to advocate for housing, show up to vote on that. And that is what bothers me.
Bothers you. I love it. Oh my God. This has been such a blast. And,
yes, it has.
it's funny because they say like, oh, and, let's talk again soon, but I probably will be on the phone with you in like the next 20 minutes about something.
Of course. So, exactly.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. This has been great. Thank you for allowing me to be the inaugural guest. I'm so honored. So
I wouldn't have it any other way.
Oh, you're great.
Thank you, Meeka.
All right. See ya. Bye.